there is a surprisingly compelling argument that we are actually carnivores. I know what you're thinking. If humans can eat both meat and plants, then that simply makes us omnivores, right? I mean, what about vitamin C? And since when was eating fruits, vegetables, and whole grains unhealthy? If we're carnivores, then why do we cook our food? And where are our claws and fangs? Well, first of all, what exactly is a carnivore? A carnivore eats mostly meat, which is the flesh of other animals. Okay, so any living organism that eats mostly meat. If we were carnivores, we wouldn't have to cook the meat that we consume. We would have fangs like other carnivores, not incisors, which are vestigial fangs. Every carnivore is different. There are plenty of examples of carnivores that don't have fangs, like pangolins, anteaters, jellyfish, squid, octopus, stink badgers, skunks, certain snakes like constrictors. The list goes on. We don't need to launch our food headfirst to be a carnivore. We have big brains, opposable thumbs, the ability to communicate in very advanced ways, strategizing and devising plans in order to catch prey, trap prey. We exhaust prey by persistence hunting, and we can obviously forge tools and throw objects with sharp points and edges that puncture organs. So we don't need sharp claws and fangs to be carnivores. We're not tigers, we're human beings. Carnivorous plants certainly don't have sharp claws and fangs, right? Like Venus flytraps, pitcher plants, sundew, butterworts. So there are many examples of living organisms out there that are carnivorous, hypercarnivorous, and don't have sharp claws and fangs. In terms of cooking meat, we have evidence of pre-human species cooking over fire in Israel around 780,000 years ago. So modern humans have always utilized fire and have used fire to cook all kinds of foods, including meat. Just because you cook your meat doesn't make it not meat. So we are still carnivores. Stable isotope ratio analysis has consistently shown that humans throughout history have thrived on a diet of around 80% animal-sourced foods versus only 20% plant-sourced foods. That makes us hypercarnivore by definition. So was this one test, one time on one individual? No. Stable isotope testing has been carried out numerous times on multiple populations around the globe. For example, European Upper Paleolithic humans had nitrogen-15 isotopes higher than other apex carnivores at the time. They had a very meat-rich diet that looked to come from mostly large herbivores. We also have early North American humans that had isotope signatures indicating a megafauna-based carnivorous diet. Remember, around 115,000 to 11,700 years ago, the last ice age occurred. I mean, what do you think we ate during that time? You guessed it, lots of megafauna, so large herbivores and ruminant animals. For humans to survive in a wild setting, we must find meat. And of course, we did spend lots of time living close to coastal areas because fish was another large part of our diet. Fish is also meat. You only have to venture out into the wild for a short period of time to realize how scarce edible plants actually are. If you don't catch game or fish, you've pretty much had it. And during an ice age, edible plants are even harder to come by. Jack Barton wrote, "Yeah, but we're not 50,000-year-old humans who only lived 40 years. Based on fossil records and genetic studies, we do understand that modern humans are at least 300,000 years old. We're certainly in the same form as our ancestors that lived 50,000 years ago." The oldest known fossils of Homo sapiens were found in 2017 in Morocco and dated back 300,000 years ago. More modern human fossils were found in Ethiopia and dated back around 200,000 years ago. The reason our ancestors had such a short lifespan is because the average lifespan was greatly affected by the vast number of infant deaths that occurred. Most humans didn't live to see past 15 years old, but when they did, they very often lived well into their 70s. Considering how brutal nature is, I think that that's incredibly impressive. You only have to turn on a survival program and most people don't last weeks. The 20% was mostly roots and tubers that were extremely low in carbohydrates. Dollop Finn said, "Roots and tubers are extremely high in carbohydrates." They are, that's correct, but not the natural organic ones our ancestors ate. You see, they were starch poor and mostly consisted of fiber. Most of the plants we eat today look nothing like their wild, natural ancestors. I mean, take a look at carrots before we got our hands on them. There's nothing of nutritional value in roots and tubers that isn't better found in fatty red meat. The principle is true of all plant nutrition. Plants contain suboptimal forms of nutrients when compared with animal foods. Heme iron, found rich in meat, is far more bioavailable than non-heme iron found in plants. It's also worth noting that it costs vitamin C to convert non-heme iron to heme iron, which is what the body wants. We've all heard that carrots are packed with vitamin A. Total fallacy. They contain beta-carotene, not retinol. If you think that they say carrots are good for your eyes, retina, it's retinol, which is pro-vitamin A found in animal foods, particularly the animal fats. Now, most people can't convert beta-carotene into retinol at such a high rate, and can often wind up with just 5% of what is said is contained within that plant food. Plants don't contain omega-3 fatty acids either. They contain ALA, which is alpha-linoleic acid, which converts to DHA and EPA, often at less than 5%. Docosahexaenoic acid and icosapentaenoic acid are your bioavailable marine omega-3 fatty acids found in animal nutrition. Everybody knows that vegans take supplements, B12 being the most obvious one. Now, the active form of B12 is methylcobalamin, found in abundance in animal nutrition. But the synthetic supplement form is often cyanocobalamin, which is not as readily available by the human body. Most supplements also contain additional ingredients like fillers, binders, and coatings. It's always best to get your nutrients from real whole food. Nutrient synergy is also very much overlooked. If you think that red meat contains B12, heme iron, zinc, copper, and amino acids, and all of these will work together to enhance overall absorption. Isolated forms of nutrients in supplement forms just aren't going to do the same thing. A herbivore eats almost exclusively vegetation. Cows, horses, deer, and even hippos eat some meat. They will consume dead animals, baby birds, and insects when the opportunity arises. So when horses and deer eat baby birds and insects, are they then omnivores? No, they're still herbivores, just like humans are still carnivores, whether certain individuals choose to eat some plants or not. Herbivores don't only eat plants, like carnivores don't only eat meat. There's no such thing as an absolute herbivore or an absolute carnivore. Even lions consume some grass because it's in the stomach of the herbivore that they're eating. So there's always some crossover, right? The bugs on the plants that herbivores are eating. And omnivores don't consume exactly 50% plants and 50% meat. It's just not possible. If you're a human and you're eating plants, that doesn't change your history. It doesn't change your anatomy, because when we're out there in a wild setting, our primary food source as human beings was and will always be meat. It's thought we would have eaten some local seasonal and ripe nuts and berries for something like 1 month of the year, just because certain fruits and veggies used to be available seasonally for 1 to 2 months only. Humans still consumed them. So yeah, we are omnivores, even though we would still function well without plants. I think this is a perfectly reasonable comment, and I totally understand where this individual's coming from. But eating some plants doesn't make us omnivore, just like herbivores that eat baby birds and insects doesn't make them omnivore. There's no real benefit to consuming berries even for just 1 month of the year. Remember, there's nothing vital in berries that we can't otherwise get in a better form in fatty red meat. The stable isotope results we've been discussing mostly refer to results from pre-agricultural people. Many people think that 12,000 years is a sufficient amount of time to adapt to a different diet. But of course, if our genetic package is 300,000 years old and we are designed to eat a certain way, to change so rapidly, we won't be able to keep up. And so it may take another 300,000 years to adapt to eating so many plants, let alone all these other additional compounds that have been introduced into our food. Remember, animals don't eat everything in moderation. They don't eat a balanced diet. They eat specialized, sometimes 1 plant, 2 plants, 3 plants, 4 plants. They don't eat everything. We're told, just eat everything in moderation. It doesn't work, because as soon as human beings started to do that, we see this trend and our health plummets and deteriorates. Eat species-specific, just like the rest of the animal kingdom that don't suffer from these modern metabolic diseases that we suffer from. This transition from hunting and gathering to farming was necessary at the time, but meant that the consumption of plants like grains, legumes, and vegetables would rise exponentially. Agriculture was absolutely necessary at the time because the population was growing so rapidly. In order to feed so many people, we pioneered new farming methods. But prior to this new era, we were thriving on megafauna during the last glacial maximum. But unfortunately, that main food source went extinct, but we didn't. It's best to predominate fatty red meat in your diet because it's the closest thing to our natural human diet. They're ruminant animals, and you can actually increase the fat intake by consuming things like marrow and egg yolks, extra tallow, etc. If you are going to eat some plants, then eat local, seasonal and ripe. I personally haven't eaten more than one punnet of blackberries in the last 3 years. For humans, it's not necessary to eat plants. Carbohydrates and polyphenols aren't vital. Quite simply, there are essential fatty acids, essential amino acids, and essential micronutrients, and all of these are found in fatty animal foods. Everyone knows if you only eat plants, you have to supplement. But most people aren't aware of the fact that if you only eat fatty red meat, you don't have to supplement at all. It's been assumed for the most part that there isn't any vitamin C in animal products like red meat, but that's a total fallacy. I mean, I would have scurvy if that was the case. During the Napoleonic Wars, the soldiers were fed horse meat to cure their scurvy because it's an anti-scorbutic agent. There is much less vitamin C in meat when compared to plant sources, but the truth is, because glucose, and carbohydrates often break down to glucose, is molecularly very similar to vitamin C, they compete for absorption. Well, on a carnivore diet, we don't consume carbohydrates or any exogenous glucose other than the small trace amounts that are found in meat like glycogen. And so the vitamin C, though it might be a small amount, meets all of our needs, which is why carnivores don't get scurvy. Plants also contain anti-nutrients and chemicals which interfere with the absorption of nutrition. Just because plants aren't mobile doesn't mean they're defenseless. Far from it. I mean, every single plant in existence fights to survive via chemical warfare. So they all possess toxins and anti-nutrients which helps fight against predation. Just like all forms of life, plants want to live, so they contain things like lectins, which you've probably heard of. I mean, gluten is probably the most well-known lectin, which is a plant protein. These not only deplete or block nutrient absorption, but they also can cause leaky gut, which is the foundation to every autoimmune disease in the book. Oxalate is another pretty common toxin or anti-nutrient found in plants. 75 to 80% of all kidney stones experienced among humans can be attributed to consuming things like spinach leaves, sweet potato, teas, licorice, rhubarb, so-called superfoods. So imagine if plants didn't contain these natural defenses. Herbivores would just eat them up and they would go extinct. So yes, there are some edible plants, but they will contain toxins and anti-nutrients. Fatty red meat, as well as being the most nutrient-dense and bioavailable food source for humans, contains no anti-nutrients or defense chemicals to speak of. When you add plant foods to your meat and eggs, you lose nutrients due to the anti-nutrients and the fiber. Fiber gets in the way of the enzymatic relationship between the nutrients in your food and the lumen of your intestine. So in other words, fiber blocks nutrients. Other people talk about blue zones and the ample health they experience eating mostly plant-based. So there are 5 blue zones: Loma Linda, California, the Nicoya Peninsula in Costa Rica, Icaria in Greece, Okinawa in Japan, and Sardinia in Italy. These populations are thought to have the longest lifespan, and it's been attributed to their plant-based diets. But of course, the people that live in these zones are all doing totally different things. Even if you took 2 different plant-based dieters, they're going to look different. So it's obviously ridiculous. And of course, these people are actually consuming lots of pork and fish, beef and fermented dairy products. So it is just pure propaganda. And of course, we have other populations around the world that live longer or as long, and they're just not as talked about because they consume so much meat. So Hong Kong have the longest life expectancy and consume lots of meat. And of course, you have Switzerland and the Nordic regions who also love meat and fish.
If I'm perfectly honest, the blue zones simply don't exist.
Unfortunately, there is an abundance of misinformation out there about the human diet. Most nutritionists and dietitians don't really understand what a real human diet is, and what they know is based on corrupt history. dietary guidelines are still based on the fraudulent work of Ansel Keys, who in 1958 came up with his diet heart hypothesis, which was basically you eat saturated fats and cholesterol. This raises serum cholesterol, it clogs up your arteries, and then you have a heart attack. But of course, another fallacy. So he came up with this 6-country study that showed that the more saturated fats and cholesterol you had, the higher incidence of coronary heart disease. But it was pure fraud because he took out the other 16 countries that were in there to make up 22 countries that they studied that didn't fit his narrative. And then, of course, we have the 3 Harvard professors that were bribed by the Sugar Foundation at the time, now known as the Sugar Association, with $50,000 equivalent of today's money to downplay the link between sugar and heart disease. And this went on to shape the way we think about food. And so there's so much corrupt history. I mean, a lot of it started with the tobacco industry. Most modern humans are not basing their diets around fatty animal nutrition, certainly not fatty red meat. They're basing it around plants. And look at the state of the health crisis we're in. When an animal deviates from their species appropriate diet, which is very specialized, they get sick. And that seems to be exactly what's happening to the human race. We're all getting these new metabolic diseases that were almost unheard of or non-existent. People obviously are consuming lots of highly processed foods, and that's clearly the worst thing you can do. Alcohol, smoking, all of that kind of stuff. But the plants that are sprayed with pesticides, they contain more natural pesticides than the pesticides we spray on them. This isn't what we're designed to eat. We are not herbivores. We are not omnivores like most people think we are. We are hyper carnivores. Now, I understand there are multiple other factors involved. It would be irresponsible of me to say that I believe that this shift in diet is the sole causal reason why we're in this health crisis. I think that there's far more to it, but I think that this is right at the top of the hierarchy. Before I went carnivore over 3 years ago, I had acne, I had acid reflux, I had lethargy, and I had very bad depression, severe depression. I was desperate for help. I stumbled across an anecdote from Michaela Peterson. I took a giant leap of faith, and in 3 weeks, all my health problems just went away. All of them. I don't have any symptoms of any health problems, and I take no supplements. And so the next time you're wondering about what you should eat, fatty red meat. Look, if you're doing carnivore, there's a good chance that someone in your life thinks you've lost the plot. Could be your partner, your mum, your best mate at work. They worry about your colon, your heart, your sanity. Maybe they mock it, or maybe they just won't shut up about fiber. Whatever it is, it wears you down. And I know because I've been there. You don't want to argue, you just want them to understand. So here's what I'm offering. You book a call, not for you, but for them. I'll speak to them directly, one-to-one on a video call, 60 or 90 minutes, just me and them. No lectures, no pressure, just calm, honest conversation with someone who lives the lifestyle, knows a thing or two about it, and actually gives a damn. Could be enough to put their mind at ease. Could be enough to get them curious. Either way, you're not the one arguing anymore. There's a link below. Sessions are limited. I'm keeping this personal. So if someone in your life needs to hear it from someone else, let me explain.